I want to begin by commending my colleague Senator Éireann and his Labour Party colleagues for this bill. It's an excellent idea, but it also, I think, speaks to that old word that we don't like to use in here sometimes, which is, I suppose, the ideological differences between us. I remember when I came home in 1979 as a 13-year-old child. My dad had just retired as factory worker. My mum was the same. And the shock when I turned up at school expecting to get books. How naive was I? Because, of course, in London, books were provided. Whereas the teacher said, no, 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 you have to buy the books, and you have to buy the books you write in as well. Interestingly, there wasn't so much voluntary contributions back then in the 70s and early 80s, not that I can remember. But it's become a completely de rigueur at this stage. I was looking at some of the figures that Bernardo's told us about last year. They do a survey each year on this, and they found that it costs more than €360 to send a senior infant child to school, significantly more for a first-year pupil, at an average of €765. It found that 11% of primary school parents and 21%, so 1 in 5 secondary school parents, are forced to borrow money to cover the costs. Now, the interesting thing is that Fergus Finlay went on to say that €103 million, in Bernardo's view, would be enough to actually make education free in this country. So it's really about choices. And I do mean this respectfully. My colleagues from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael were talking about the good work that goes on. I have to acknowledge that, first of all. But here's the thing. Surely the first choice we should make is to believe in free education. Surely the first choice we should make as a republic is to believe and implement it. And it doesn't cost the earth, but it does mean making different choices. We can't choose to continue to give tax cuts to the wealthy while turning our backs on children and parents who can't afford those fees. And certainly I do know of subtle pressures, subtle but clear pressures on parents in relation to the need to pay these fees. And as I say, they are quite substantial. And I thought Senator Éireann made a very good point in terms of it would make parents less likely to come along to parent-teacher evenings, in particular, because of the potential embarrassment, because they hadn't paid the fee. I'm not suggesting that teachers would take it out on those parents, quite the opposite, frankly, but it's naturally. The point is, Senator Hawken, it would still inhibit parents, if they hadn't paid the fee, potentially, to go along that evening. And surely, as a first principle, any of us who claim to be Republican must believe in free education. This is not pie in the sky. It happens across most of Europe. This is the norm. The reason it hasn't happened here is because, unfortunately, because of our history, rather than having a left-right divide, we've been dominated by two right-wing parties who don't believe in universalism, who've never believed in universalism, and somehow feel it's okay that people should pay fees, that somehow, well, it will save the state some money. Well, it does, but at what cost? At what cost to children? At what cost to the principle of equality? And if this recovery is to mean anything, surely the first thing the government should do, if they get to a next budget, is ring-fence that €103 million. As Fergus Finlay said last year, it's petty change in terms of the overall budget for education. Ring-fence that money and make education free. This can be done. What's lacking, and what's always been lacking, is the political will to make it happen. And that's why I welcome this bill, because it's a very simple, clear bill that will enable real progress to be made. I think we should all work together to actually progress this bill and get it through this House quickly, and put it up to the government, and put it up to the ministers as well, to see, do they really believe in the principle of free education? By the way, the other irony is, for that sum of money, €103 million, how much do we subsidise private fee-paying schools each year? I can't recall the figure, but somewhere between 30 and 45, I think, million a year. How do you square that, Minister? How do you square subsidising private fee-paying schools while allowing parents to suffer because they don't have the money to put their children to school and putting them into debt. How do you possibly justify that? And what reason could you give for allowing that to continue? And again, it comes down to choices, it comes down to ideology. I think for those of us on the left, the lesson is to push progressive politics, as is happening this evening, and not to prop up these parties, even if it takes a little longer to get the change we need. We've put up for too long with conservative politics in this country, and what it's led to is inequality, mass emigration, and failure, not just once but several times. So, I'm delighted, to be fair, that the bill isn't going to be opposed, and I say I want to commend my colleagues in Labour for bringing this into the Chamber. But really and truly, if this government is serious about making a difference, then ring-fence that money and make it happen. What could be more important than building true equality into our education system? Surely that's more important than tax cuts. Surely that's more important than subsidising multinational companies that already get a hell of a deal here in this country. So, perhaps we need more debate on this. As I say, it's an ideological issue, but I welcome the contributions this evening. And I hope we get a little bit more time to see how far we can bring this bill and challenge the government and challenge this innate conservatism that's held us back for too long in this country. Very much.